Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge. I know that you're here because you want to master your animal training skills using a force-free approach. And to handle the variety of challenges you face, you need a broad knowledge and experience base. The problem is, we all get stuck and hit rough patches in our training, which can leave us feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Our mission since 2015 is to empower trainers just like you. The Animal Training Academy has helped thousands of trainers globally to develop skills, gain confidence, and positively influence both animal and human learners. Here's how we can do the same for you. Sign up for our membership waitlist at www.atamember.com. Register when our doors open email arrives and start growing your training skills. Build impactful training practices benefiting you and those you train. So join the waitlist at www.atamember.com. And while waiting, enjoy this free podcast show. We want to see you avoid embarrassment, overwhelm, and burnout. Instead, we want to see you build resilience to setbacks, get more organized, and grow your training skills and knowledge. In short, we want to see you enjoy confidence in yourself as a trainer and lead a fulfilling life, positively impacting the lives of the animal and human learners you work with. But we will start today's episode where I'm thrilled to welcome good friend Jennifer Shryock, a certified dog behaviour consultant and founder of Family Paws LLC. Jennifer's career, initially grounded in her experience as a special education teacher, pivoted significantly when she adopted a rescue German Shepherd in the year 2000, leading her into the realm of dog behaviour consultancy. Recognising the challenges faced by families with young children and dogs, Jennifer then developed two pioneering programs through Family Paws, Dogs and Storks and Dogs and Toddlers. These programs have garnered significant recognition, being featured in major publications and on various media platforms. Jennifer's mission extends beyond her local community as she mentors dog trainers worldwide in helping families safely integrate dogs into their homes and work with families, especially families who have young children. Her work is driven by a vision of harmonious coexistence between families, children, and dogs. So I'm excited for you to listen to join us today as Jennifer shares her invaluable insights on navigating the dynamics between dogs, babies, and toddlers, a topic that promises to be super valuable for you, the listener. So it's my great pleasure to welcome her to the show today. She's patiently waiting by. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us at the Animal Training Academy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a very exciting time.
It is an exciting time, and I'm excited to be recording this today because literally yesterday, my amazing wife did one of the most, I was talking to Jennifer before we pushed record, one of the most primal, life-changing things that I will ever witness. She gave birth again, this time to our second child, Kaya Sky Cartledge. Our family unit has therefore shifted once more. We're now 2 adults, 1 dog, 2 cats, a 3.5-year-old small human, and a newborn. And with this change in our family unit comes great joy, but also new worries and stress. Not only do we now have to figure out how to meet everyone's needs, but we also need to ensure, with the same amount of resources as we had previously, that everyone stays safe. I mean, it was hard enough juggling all our household responsibilities without a newborn. And now, specifically thinking about safety, given the increased interactions and potential interactions between our mini earthlings under our roof, there's a lot to navigate. Consequently, I'm thrilled to record this episode today. Perfect timing, because either directly or indirectly, Jen's been helping thousands of families with this specific challenge for decades. So for this episode, to assist me in my situation and to aid others either in the same situation or those helping clients with this challenge, I've compiled a list of 10 questions for Jennifer, and I can't wait to go through them. Can we get started, Jen?
I'm ready. Yes. Well, first of all, congratulations to you and your family, your growing family. That's such an exciting time.
It is. I am head over heels in love and in absolute awe of what my wife did yesterday. It was that word primal I used. It was just the most otherworldly experience watching that process. Well, and she had a natural birth. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So thank you for the congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jen, I put together 10 questions. My first one is about boundaries. So we have physical boundaries in our house. We have baby gates everywhere, and then we've got mental boundaries of what's okay and what's not okay. But can you explain the concept of boundaries in the context of dogs interacting with new babies and young children?
Right. So we really want to make sure that everybody's comfortable and dogs, and safe. And so I don't know, how newborns feel. We don't, unfortunately, newborns and dogs are on the same playing field in that they can't communicate verbally with us about how they feel about a dog being up close to them. But I really like to have boundaries, safety, make sure that there's enough distance and space and that the dog isn't up close to a newborn, and one, for the dog to not be uncomfortable and also for the child to not be uncomfortable. I think a lot of times we don't think about, I'm wondering what the infant thinks, that they don't speak. So I think a lot of times people allow the dogs up super close to babies, and we just want to have comfort and safety and make sure that everybody's comfortable. And I'm curious if an infant expresses concern being, next to a newborn. So, I mean, next to a dog. So it's super important to me that we have successful boundaries and have distance and, a comfort space around a newborn. It's really important.
Yeah, I was holding Kaya this morning and it's like, I have no idea what you're thinking. Because it's my second child, I feel like I'm more experienced. But yeah, absolutely unaware, but wanting to assume that she's definitely feeling and experiencing and learning consistently. So what does that look like? If you're a listener of the show and you're like me and you've got a newborn at home and you want to set boundaries, what are you doing? What behaviors and skills do you need to develop, and what behaviors are you doing to set that up?
Absolutely. So it's important that you have practiced ahead of time using things like baby gates, play yards, X pens, but that you're also working with your dog so that you're able to have a little distance. I like teaching a backup cue, things like that. As I'm holding a newborn, I want to be sure that, they're kind of held away from the dog, not right at that level. And we're talking to the dog. We can have them come over to one side while the baby's on the other side. But they don't need to be sniffing right in their face. And I think that's where we see a lot of people, do have the dog go right up to an infant's face. And I don't know. I feel uncomfortable with those things. So I like them to come up to the person who's holding the baby, if that's comfortable, if the dog is seeming comfortable. If a dog is overexcited, then we're going to have more boundaries in place, such as a play yard or X pen or, things like that to keep a little more distance. Yeah. But as a parent, you have a different feeling, right? So I think that's another part of the boundary is paying attention to what feels comfortable for you as a parent. I know for myself, when I brought home I've brought home 4 babies, and my third baby, I remember feeling my shepherd had just the biggest mouth and the biggest head and everything. And my comfort level had to be assessed and evaluated as well. And with each of my dogs, it was very different. And I think that that's a valuable and important thing to pay attention to as well, is comfort level of the dog, comfort level of the infant, comfort level and safety of everybody involved.
Yeah, your gape on the dog you just talked about is probably the same size as my Chihuahua cross. So a little bit of a different experience, but nonetheless, it's still important and consciously aware of and putting things in place to have those boundaries. especially with an unpredictable toddler thrown in the mix, which is something that I'm sure you've helped lots of families with. It's not just about the newborn. It's not just about the parents. There's often also other young children who are learning and who are experiencing the newborn and
Yes.
learning how to interact with dogs. Any advice or any input, or does that spur any extra thoughts for you talking about that consideration?
It does. And, a toddler is going to be experiencing a lot of different changes in this experience. Their attention, parents are going to have their diverted attention, and that's going to make things a little more complicated. And so that inadvertently can make things a little more complicated with the dog and child too, because, there's just more going on, right? But, a toddler, I like to include them as much as possible. I saw you had a little baby doll and things like that you can role play and practice with, and, include Summer in those things. And that's what's really, really important. It's so incredibly important that you're including the toddler so that they don't feel completely left out. But in the same regard, we have to think about safety as well, and realizing that our attention is diverted, So having things, I know in my household, we had extra gates, we had extra communication between my husband and I about who was where, and making sure that everybody was doing what we wanted them to be doing, especially with a newborn, because you don't want to have a lapse in supervision. So you want to make sure that you're communicating together about who's where and who's doing what, and helping each other out that way.
And so it's also about, would I be correct in saying, does this align with your thoughts, predicting what's going to happen in 60 seconds from now, as opposed to just what's happening in front of you, and making sure that boundary assistance, boundary management is in place in advance? It's
definitely important to think ahead. And I think, that was something that my husband and I spent a lot of time talking about. We are going to be doing this. Therefore, where are the other children going to be? Where's the baby going to be? We had 4 dogs when we brought my 4th baby home. We had to really consider who was where, and each dog's comfort level, especially in those early days. Each of my dogs was very individual. One was very relaxed and calm and had been around babies and children before, and she was, a little more chill. One of them was absolutely uncomfortable, barking, a bit of growling with every noise and sound, so we had to have different boundaries and different setups and make sure that Windsor had his own space, and communicate where is he going to be when we're going to, do diaper change, or when we're going to do interaction, with the other children. We just had to constantly keep that communication going, because each dog was so individual in how they were responding to the baby, and you have to keep in mind where the children are, and navigating all those moving parts is a little different, in those early days.
Yeah, it's a lot of interactions, and it's also the change in the environment of a newborn and in how that interacts, or how that impacts dog-to-dog interactions. It's not just the dog-to-baby interactions, but it's 4 different dogs interacting with 4 different dogs, or 3 other different dogs. So each dog's interacting with 3 dogs, and then that dog's interacting. That is a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think this is where communication with partners really matters too, is reminding each other, that when you are engaged with an activity or something with the baby, you're making sure that, all the safety factors are in place, and communication. Yeah, it's really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking about boundaries and safeties. That was my first question out of the 10 I've come up with. My second one is, in your role, what are some of the common challenges that pet owners face when introducing a new baby to their dog?
I think one of the most common challenges is that there's different expectations. I think we have expectations that our dogs are going to, immediately accept this new being as part of our family, and they're going to just know that this is a baby and it's part of our family. And that I want to remind people that it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something, and which should be a comfort to people, that it does take time. It's not that initial, what I refer to as homecoming. It takes a period of time. So just like when we add a new dog to the household, or we add cats to the household, or, we have to allow time and, for a relationship to develop and build. And that really does take some time. So the expectations, I think, can really set people up. What I can tell you is, we get through our voicemail, I hear expectations fall apart, where a family is saying, we played baby sounds, we carried a doll, and our dog is still, beside themselves. And these families are really, really, really stressed out and very frantic in their calls. And, because their expectation was that those exercises would make it so that everything would go super smoothly. And they need to be reminded that this is a brand new being to their dog. And that when you add all the stimuli, the visual, the scent, the sounds, all of that together, and then the human responses, it's going to be different than what you practiced ahead of time. It's going to take some time. All those things you did ahead of time are phenomenal, but it's still going to take some time for your dog to get into the groove of things and see all the changes that are happening.
And for those listening who are working with clients in their homes and get requests to assist with challenges with animals around newborns or around young children, any advice to professionals on setting expectations for clients?
I think talking to them ahead of time, that, again, as I was saying, it is going to take a matter of time. Your dog does not know this newborn. And with every change, like going from an infant being in your arms in cradle hold to an infant facing outward to an infant now reaching and grabbing, all those changes are going to be, for some dogs, monumental. For other dogs, they don't really care. They're like, whatever, they roll with it. But for some dogs, each one of these different developmental stages and achievements, small as they may be, it can be a milestone for the dog as well. And it may take time. So I think, if, as behavior consultants and trainers, if we can say, your dog is going to adjust and it's going to take some time, and these are some of the milestones that we can expect your dog might have some challenges or difficulties or different feelings about, and then we can prepare them. And that way it's not as scary, right? So if we say, okay, we're going to play baby sounds and your dog is going to be, great with all baby sounds, that can be really a setup for a family to be very, very, very uncomfortable when their baby cries and their dog all of a sudden is responding. And they think, wow, we played baby sounds. We did all the things. They did do all the things. And those are really great things to do. But now that the baby is there and they're holding the baby and they're emotionally responding to the baby and physiologically responding to the baby, especially lactating moms, it's going to be different. And so we want to help them with that. We want to prepare them for that and say, some of these inquisitive things with the dog are going to be there, and we're here to guide you with that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's going to be super helpful for those working with families. My question number 3, and I remember a few years ago watching a funny video that you put together of your daughter bringing home their boyfriend's underwear and asking you to smell it before they brought their boyfriend, their actual physical boyfriend, home. Could you share some strategies and talk about that myth in that video? But can you share some strategies for helping dogs adjust to the presence? Let's say a dog's having a hard time, or you just want to help it be prepared in advance, for helping dogs adjust to the presence of a baby or young child in the home.
So we definitely want to have as much preparation ahead of time so that the people are able to be relaxed and as calm as possible, right? Because our dogs are going to be feeding off of us. Yeah, the video was about bringing home the blanket, because so many people do recommend bring home the blanket, let your dog have one scent, sniff, and that will be, they'll understand that this is part of the family and all that. We want people to realize that it's going to be gradual. And so practicing just a little bit at a time, and bringing home, it's certainly not harmful to bring home something for the dog to sniff, but we don't want them to think that this is the end all be all. So gradual exposure is super important, to just gradually expose the dog to the baby, and, have positive things for them to be doing. I love using things like licky mats, snuffle mats, things like that, so that they can kind of take sneak peeks and have something to do, and self-soothing, but also see what's going on. So those are things that we love for them to do. And use baby's name, and use, as you're engaging and interacting, I like to have baby's name involved and start pairing that with positive experiences and positive treats, positive exposure. Yeah. So lots of different things that we can do, but it takes time.
So my fourth question, and you've already answered this to a degree, so you can say pass, or you can build on it with anything else that comes to your mind. But my question is, anything else that parents can do to ensure the safety of both children and their newborn and pets during the early days?
100%. There's the awake, aware adult supervision. So we know for sure that to ensure safety, we must make sure that there's no access to a newborn with the family dog, just because dogs are dogs. They're inquisitive in their own way. And we need to make sure that that is, the number one priority, is that there's no access. So I would say supervision is the key thing for people to keep in mind in the early days, supervision, and then positive exposures as well.
When you say no access, you mean no access at all, or no access when you're not able to 100% be supervised?
Yeah, so when you're not able to be present 100%, or you're not able to be there. So for example, sleeping, we want to be sure that if a dog is used to sleeping in the bedroom, we have made accommodations so that we're doing a crate, or we're having some other accommodation so that the dog isn't loose in the bedroom while parent is sleeping. We don't want the dogs, if they've been sleeping on the bed, necessarily to be next to a bassinet or a co-sleeper or something like that. So we want to be careful about those things, and practice ahead of time what the dog's sleeping arrangement is going to be. I know here in the States, it's recommended that baby sleeps in the parent's room for the first 6 months. And so it's really important that we make sure that that's accounted for. A lot of people wait until the baby's there, and then they say, oh no, what do we do? We're not comfortable with the dog being in the room. And I, from a safety perspective, want a family to practice what they're going to do as far as sleep arrangements, whether the dog is going to be out of the room, whether they're going to be tethered on one side of the bed, in a secure spot, whether they're going to be crated, whether they're going to be, used a gate or an X pen. What are they going to do to ensure the safety for everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because for me, it's near impossible to not have distractions, especially with multiple mini earthlings. Someone's always doing something.
Right. But you're present. We might say that there are times you're going to be passively supervising, but you're always going to have some distraction, but you're physically present, right? And that's the important thing. So
we want to be really aware of safety. We're going to my fifth question now. And we're thinking about proximity. We're thinking about being present, and when we're present and actively paying attention. And what was the other way you described it? Non-actively?
Aware. Yeah, active, aware, awake supervision.
Yeah, that awake part's hard too sometimes.
That awake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with a newborn, that awake part is actually quite challenging. If you sit
The awake
down,
part is essential. There's a reason we added that. It's because, not to go to a dark, scary place, but it's absolutely 100% essential. And, for, lactating moms, while they're nursing, they can get a little sleepy. That's a normal response when nursing. And so if people aren't expecting that, you might easily doze off. And as you're saying, it's normal to be really tired and exhausted, but it's even more, there's reasons why, people get a little bit groggy, get a little more oxytocin flowing and can doze off. And so we want to make sure that we're making sure there's no access when we doze off or fall asleep. We want to make sure that the dog has a comfortable, safe spot and that we're planning ahead. Yeah.
and I'm thinking about our life at the moment, and there's very little time where I think an adult would sit down for half an hour in a calm, let's say baby's dozing or just chilling out, and not risk falling asleep. And then into summer, our toddler into our household, and then anything could happen. So it's easy to potentially over manage interactions and just not have them happen at all, because we're constantly aware that we might not be able to give everything and everyone the attention that they need in any moment in time. But can you just add to everything you've said so far, and maybe you've said it all, but speak to that, because obviously we need to allow the child and the dog to learn about each other. How can this be managed effectively?
Yeah, so I would love to include toddlers and younger children in a way that is kind of hands off. We're not necessarily physically touching the dog, but we can talk about the dog. We don't necessarily need to put our hands on the dog. We can talk, we can wave. I teach young children really early on that when a dog is resting in their spot, we're going to wave to them, or we're going to blow a kiss, or we're going to do something different than just go over to it and, hug it and that kind of thing. We want to have activities and games that provide some predictability for both dog and child. So things like, kibble fetch, or holding a child on our lap and doing some different activities, tossing a ball, things like that, help including children in preparation of some of those, things like licking mats, things like that. There's lots of things that we can do that are not physically directly, engaged with the dog, but are active interaction and allow them to experience the joy of a dog being in the home and that kind of thing. And then everything we model in front of our younger children, they are going to imitate and mimic and do, so we are constantly teaching those learning eyes, So when you think about it, Summer is watching everything that you do. And so you have a huge opportunity. And that's what I think about this age and stage. It's a huge opportunity to model appropriate, gentle, loving interaction, which will then be what they can imitate and engage in. Once they're a little more predictable, toddlers are completely unpredictable, so it's hard. And obviously, newborns, infants, when they're about 6 months, start grabbing, and they have different things that they do. So we want to be modeling appropriate, safe, loving interaction so that that's all that they do know. And I can give an example. I remember my daughter at 2.5, we had always said no hugs with the dogs, like hugging can make them uncomfortable was more what we would say. And I remember reaching over and putting my arm around the dog, and my daughter at 2.5 would say, "Mommy, no huggies." And I would say, "Oh, she does know, she does." And I say, "So what would Duke prefer? What would he prefer? Can you show me?" And she could show me, and she would show me, petting on the side. But we modeled those things with her stuffed dogs. We, showed those things. We, that didn't mean that she was consistently going to engage that way. It just meant that she was learning. And that's, I think, one of the most beautiful parts of having younger children in the home. And a lot of professionals don't necessarily take that opportunity, but it's a huge opportunity to teach the next generation how we want to engage and interact safely and comfortably, through modeling, so it's constant learning. Even though we may not be touching the dog all the time, we're modeling all the time.
See, big responsibility being a parent, isn't it, Jen? And because it's hard to just constantly have that in your mind, and it makes you become a better person.
Well, it does. And, when you're having a bad day and you're a little more, I definitely, my children have definitely modeled some things that I've had to step back and say, oh, yeah, let's redo that. Or maybe that's not the best thing. No, it is stressful, but it's also magical because you really get to influence this next, you get to really play a role in what they're going to do with dogs and cats and all animals and living creatures. You get to be a great role model there.
In cases where, this is my next question number 6 out of the 10 we've come up with. In cases where a dog has exhibited reactive or anxious behaviours, what steps can be taken to create a calm and safe environment? And I know for us with our Chihuahua cross Phoebe, we identified some behaviours that we attached the label anxious to. And we had a vet behaviourist come in. And so in anticipation of the huge changes that were happening in our house, we went a pharmaceutical route to try and help Phoebe, which has been really positive in our situation. I'm curious to hear, for those working with clients or have young children in their home and they have a reactive or anxious pet, what are some other things that can be done to help in those situations?
Well, we really want to break down what the dog's sensitivities are. I think this is a really important aspect of it, is to understand where that anxiety is coming from to the best of our ability. Is it sight related, sound related? Sound can be, when you're bringing all this new equipment into the home, even down to baby monitors having a buzzing sound or different channels and wavelengths, dogs can be really reactive and sensitive, and those things can lead to anxieties in the home that you're not even thinking about, all the new things that are being brought into the home. So I think really focusing on, and I like to work with, it's part of our program, working with the families to look at the dog's sensitivities ahead of time so that you're much more aware. Like if your dog is super reactive to changes in appearance, then you can expect that possibly the changes in developmental milestones and changes as baby sits up, faces out with the, big staring eyes, that might affect your dog a little more because it's visual. Dogs that have sensitivities to sirens, sounds, noises, we might expect that they're going to be a little more anxious and stressed with baby cries and some of the equipment and sounds. And so pinpointing it, but also working with a professional. I love that you were open to the pharmacology. For some dogs, that really is the best thing that's going to help. Heck, for some humans, it also too. It helps calm that noise down. It helps, so that you're able to work with a behavior modification program, or you're able to create a calmer, safer environment that's more comfortable for them as well, with some predictability. So predictability is definitely something that is really important for dogs that are anxious. And so that would be, setting up routines, keeping, some of the daily routines the same as much as possible. So I'd want them to look at all those things: sensitivity, the predictability of routines, and get the help of a behavior consultant or a trainer that is going to focus on positive methods and supporting them, as well as possibly the assistance and help of a veterinary behaviorist, which we constantly are referring to, because if you have an older dog and now their world's changed with all these different added stimuli, it could be really difficult, and a VB can really help us out in those situations. Predictability
is a label that I would not attach to our 3.5-year-old. and right. For Summer, or for Phoebe, with Summer in her environment, that, in my opinion, led to what I would label as anxiety. the inability to settle or
Mhm.
the reactiveness to stimuli, sound, visual, and the changes in that. What are some other things that families can do if changes weren't able to be predicted, but they find that their pet, their dog, is showing signs of stress or discomfort that wasn't expected? What are
Mm.
some other suggestions you might have?
So, so some other things that we could do to help with predictability, is that what you're asking?
How to help the dog more who's showing signs of stress or discomfort that weren't
Mm.
able to be predicted by the humans.
I think this is where having tricks and having things that they know to do that are within their wheelhouse, that they feel confident about and are things that are comfortable for them, is really important. Um, you know, things that we've done, normal routines, keeping that is really important. But this is where I like to have tricks. This is where I like to have that relationship with the person, with eye contact, checking in with them, is really important. Those kinds of things is really important. Having the person be able to respond to the sensitive subtleties in body language is also really important. So, you know, those things are really important to me, and I think are helpful for the dog if the person is very aware of some of the subtleties in body language and is able to respond when a dog is starting to show signals, and we are able to then give them something else to do or guide them in a direction that we know they're a little more confident and comfortable. That's where relaxation, having a mat, having place, having all the different things that we can have them have skills. It can be very helpful in creating predictability for them.
And since you interpreted my question initially slightly differently, now I'm curious to know what the answer to that question would be. Any tips or advice on creating predictability in an environment that is so intuitively is the word that comes to mind, it's not the right word, but that can be so unpredictable, and where that unpredictability is sourced from the
Right.
many entities that are living in that space.
So, are you referring to, and just to make sure I'm understanding, you're saying, so in an unpredictable environment, what can we do to help the dog with that?
Yeah, and how can we help set up predictability? If you have any thoughts on that, in a
Yeah.
space where that unpredictability is
Hmm.
from a entity who is learning about the world, and their
Yeah.
job is to be unpredictable, to see what happens when they behave like this or that.
Right. Well, and I think about what I used to do, and that was, we would have different activities where I would involve the kids where there's more structure. So, for example, if my children, they're not predictable, right, in general at the younger age, but I might have an activity. For example, we might use a stool, and that indicates that we're going to play a game, or we might use um, different barriers, and that equals that game. So, just different things that we use to signal different events and that kind of thing. I think I'm just thinking through how we did it in our home. And things like, my daughter knew we would do some training activities when we had a special mat out, or we would have a stool that she would stand on, and we would play hide and seek games and things like that. So creating some predictability for the child as well as for the dog really helps to provide some structure. And that decreases some of that anxiety. At least that's what I found. I find that to be true.
And you talked about a stool there, and
Mhm.
that ties into the idea of stations, and you have this thing called success stations. Can you talk about what
Yes.
success stations are? This is my 8th question for you, Jen, today. What are success stations, and how do they contribute to the comfort and safety of both child and dog?
Yeah. So success stations, when I think about it from the dog's point of view, if they know, okay, on the mat, this is what I do, right? I lay down and good things happen, or I enjoy a bone or something. And for the child, I love success stations as well, because it's kind of like in preschool, kids have their mats or their rugs that they sit on for circle time. And it allows them to know, okay, this is what we do at this moment and at this time. And so I really think that that helps create stability, for both the dog and the child. It allows them to say, all right, we're going to engage in an activity, and the smaller one is going to participate in this activity. It provides that predictability. And, and that allows them to be successful. So that's why I started calling them success stations, because people tend to get a little upset if we say, use a crate, use a gate, have some barriers. But using barriers and boundaries allows the dog to be successful and allows the child to be successful as well. So I, refer to gates, crates, and X pens and those kinds of things as success stations, because when the dog is there, they're going to succeed because we've set them up to succeed. And we can stretch that to children as well by using stools and using mats and using, places as well to kind of station them. I like the magic chair, we're going to use the chair when we put kibble down on the floor, then you come back to home base and you sit, and then we release the dog, things like that, so that they're, they know, all right, this is what we do when we engage in the game with the dog. These are the rules and this is how we play.
My ninth question was, I love hearing about success stories, and I'm just keen to hear some that you have about families that you might have worked with, where some of the things we've talked about today have been implemented and you have managed to shift the dynamics that we talked about right at the start of this episode in that space, and create those harmonious relationships between the dogs and family members. Can we hear some success to transition from success stations? Can we transition to success stories? Would you mind sharing some with us, Jen?
Absolutely. There's so many that come to mind, but there's one in particular that I really, really love. And he was, a rescue pitty, and his family was using techniques I wasn't comfortable with when we first met. And they were not necessarily familiar with his body language, and at times were even, harsh when he would display certain things because they were misunderstanding it. We worked a lot on body language, understanding his sensitivities. And he had a bite history, several bites to small children when there were situations that were unpredictable to him prior to their baby being born. I met them when they were, I believe, 6 months pregnant, and we worked through a lot of things. First of all, understanding and connecting and developing that relationship and bond with the dog through his communication. And that was really, really just so inspiring, to see a change in the relationship between the guardians and their dog. And also that eased some of the fear and the pressure that the mom was feeling. She was feeling very anxious about having her newborn and having her baby and this dog with his history. And because we increased the understanding of body language and we increased their relationship, really built it based on a recognition of subtle signals and body language and sensitivities. It really helped her to feel much more relaxed and confident with handling her dog. He did phenomenally well, but they did phenomenally well. They actually really maintained, when there would be a change in development, they would take a couple steps back and go back to, for example, using a barrier or using the indoor success stations that we had. And they now have 2 children. We have not had an incident. And it's just beautiful because I see how much they learned prior to having the baby. They, as far as building a relationship with their own dog and understanding of body language, and they're modeling that for their child and for their children. And it's really, really neat to see and visit with them and get updates to hear how well they're doing. So that story touches my heart greatly, because this was a dog that I wasn't so sure it was going to work out. We also did include the support and help of a veterinary behaviorist for medication, and that helped out. And that was wonderful. And then I have another one that I always think about also too, where it's the only dog in my career that's ever bit me. And it was she was really just kind of beside herself, and her family kind of carried her around and just didn't really allow her to be a dog in the dog sense. And they learned about body language communication sensitivities and how including some basic tricks and things like that would build her confidence. And we also used a veterinary behaviorist as well. And she also, too, ended up being a great success story, with ending up with 2 children in the home and being able to be included and part of the family, which was great because they weren't expecting that. And in fact, there was a lot of conflict about methodologies and what they were going to do to handle the situation. And so it was just really, really beautiful to see them come around and see success with positive training methods and behavior, and and have it be happy ending.
2 of the countless number of families your work and out of Family Paws has touched, whether directly or indirectly through your certified Family Paw instructors. Is that the correct terminology to describe someone who's been through your program?
Licensed Family Paws educators.
Thank
we
you.
are licensed. Yeah. No problem.
Do you want to share for those listening what that program is and how it works?
Absolutely. We offer a 13-week program for dog professionals who are interested in specializing and getting more comfortable with an area that they might feel a little uneasy, uncomfortable with. And we talk a lot about child development and the different stages and how that might impact the family dog. And it's kind of a really neat, I think, a really neat niche for dog professionals to become more familiar with, because as I say, I think there's a lot of light bulb moments for families, and you can be a part of that by becoming more familiar with these different stages and development and the small bits towards success, I think, are really cool. So that's part of our program. It's 13 weeks. And
And when is your next offering on that?
January 9th, we are having our next 13-week session. And we are currently running a special on that. So, but it's 30% off, but it's January 9th. And once you've graduated from that, then you become part of our Family Paws Parent Educator Network. And it's a very supportive group. And we continue to provide monthly education and information related to the dog and child topic.
Well, that is a program that's worth every cent. So gratitude for the discount that you're offering people, and you've decided to experiment with leveraging the Cyber Monday. Is that right? Worldwide
Yes.
Phenomenon to offer that discount this year.
Giving into the sales idea, yes.
We're all business owners, or a lot of us are business owners who listen to this podcast, so we understand. So how does one, if someone is interested in the program, where do they learn more? How do they access that?
They can go to the Family Paws website, and then there's a section for dog professionals, and go right there. And the information is readily available there.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering all of those questions. That's 9. I do have one more.
Okay.
So a lot of us who listen to this show, we work with dogs. Shout out to the listeners who work with all the amazing other species. A lot of us work with dogs. A lot of us are professionals, but we've also got just your average owner who listens to, well, probably above average if you're listening to this podcast show. You're just your owner of your a dog or other pets in the household. I know for me, Jen, I reached out to you before we put Phoebe on pharmaceuticals, and I talked to a friend who's also a vet behaviourist here in New Zealand, and I reached out to many other professionals in our industry and learned from some of the content that others have out there. The flirt assessment tool that's in Leslie McDevitt's Control Unleashed book was super helpful. But I needed to get reassurance, as you know, Jen, and guidance on going down that pharmaceutical route. And I'm so glad I did now that we've done that. But I didn't have confidence, having not experience in that realm myself. So for the listeners of this show, maybe it's for yourself in your own home if you're like me, or maybe it's for the clients that you work with. What are the signs that extra professional help might be needed to address behaviours around the situation of pets and children in our households?
Yeah, I think the first thing is any change in behavior, whether your dog, something that's a little unusual and you notice they're panting, pacing, not able to settle more, those kinds of things, sudden startling reactivity, meaning, they can't settle. I think that's really important. Or, their body language, noticing that they're just stressed. You're seeing a lot more whale eye, you're seeing a lot more avoidance behaviors, things like that. Those are things that I hear a lot about. Anxiety, I would say, is the number one thing, though, that I see, and meaning pacing, panting, inability to settle, whining, constant whining, or arousal, barking, growling, those things. We definitely want to get some help. But any change in behavior, I think, is a reason to reach out to someone for assistance and help, especially once a newborn's on the scene, because we want to make sure that everybody's feeling comfortable and relaxed with it. And sometimes pharmacology is really helpful, as you found.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything today, Jennifer. If you are listening to this and you are in a situation where maybe in your own household you have young children, or you're in a situation where you're working with clients and you're getting requests to assist in situations that involve young children and dogs, I wanted to advise you, if you haven't already done so, to head to the Family Paws website and check out their resources. If you have any questions, reach out to Jen. Jen is, for the listener of the show, such a genuine and amazing human. I know, Jen, I remember a couple of years ago when a mutual colleague of ours had an unexpected newborn coming into their house, and this individual was in a high level of stress and anxiety around some of the animals that lived in the house. And I remember reaching out to you and just asking if you would assist, and I think you did it off your own bat, and you didn't even charge, and you jumped on and you spent an hour and a half with this person, and you changed their life because you helped give them confidence and reassurance. And it was one of the kindest gestures that I've seen in this industry. So if you're the listener, want to learn from Family Paws and learn about this, then Jenna's the real deal, everyone. I highly encourage you to go to check out her resources. Can you tell the listener where they can go to find out more about Family Paws, the opportunities we've talked about today, any other opportunities, and say, sure, get in touch, Jen?
Absolutely. So they can go to familypaws.com. They can email me at jen@familypaws.com. I would love to hear from people, and I especially love supporting other professionals. And for those in the States, we have a support line at 877-247-3407. And that's for professionals as well as their families to get immediate help and support.
Amazing. Well, we're going to link to all of us in the show notes, Jen. I'm so glad that we got to do this. And to be honest with you, everyone listening, it wasn't timed that we would do this 2 days after my child was born. The universe just threw that one at us. So perfect timing, serendipitous. Jen, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you as well so much for listening. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. It's our hope today's conversation sparked inspiration and added some tools to your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every training challenge is an approximation towards becoming a better trainer. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our waitlist and be the first to know when our membership doors open again. There you'll find a supportive community of trainers just like you, working to make a positive difference in the lives of animals and humans alike. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay resilient, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.